Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris, and welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. A huge thank you to everyone listening right now, especially those of you who tune in every Monday and Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. Also, if you haven't already done so, check out one of the 3 guest series episodes we published over the last month. Our listeners have been asking us to have guests on the podcast for more than a year, and we're listening and making that happen. Okay, for this week's episode, I want to talk about the tendency of many leaders who want to pick their battles when it comes to coaching or giving feedback to their employees. We've all been there. An employee reports to you and they're a tough nut to crack. Maybe your relationship with them is contentious, or maybe it's just non-existent. They have their way of doing things, and for the most part, that way is fine. But every once in a while, their way is not the right way, for the business needs, the team or the company culture, or the well-being of their coworkers. At that moment, many leaders will gravitate towards saying nothing. They'll rationalize it by believing it's better for their relationship with that person if they don't seem like they're nitpicking or making a big deal out of things. It's possible that most other leaders have allowed these small transgressions to slide, and if you become the first leader in several months or years to call out this person for their actions, you'll come off like the only one who's bothered by them while no one else seems to care. Or maybe the employee means well and never intentionally screws up, they just can't seem to grasp certain concepts. So it's rationalized that because their net overall contribution is fantastic, maybe the boat shouldn't be rocked. At a retail organization I work with, there's a sales role that is very highly scheduled, meaning every minute is calculated to make sure customers are being served, tasks are being accomplished, and training is done. Work breaks are scheduled to ensure too many people aren't gone at the same time, and the more employees adhere to this schedule, the smoother things run. And in this role, there are 2 employees who seem to have a really hard time keeping to their schedule. And unfortunately, it causes a ripple effect that impacts their coworkers, the customers, and the overall flow of business. But the motivations of these 2 people, meaning what lies behind their inability to self-manage, is very different. One of them is incredibly passionate about helping customers, is highly flexible, and is an absolute joy to work with. They're just very absent-minded and have shown they really don't have an internal voice telling them to keep track of their schedule. The other is also very good at their job, but likes things highly structured. They're keenly aware of their schedule and where they're supposed to be at all times. They just have an idea of what their schedule should look like, and they'll find things to do or not do so that their schedule lines up more closely with what they'd prefer it to be. The results of these 2 employees failing to be where they should be are nearly identical. The reasons for fixing these 2 situations are also the same, but the conversations each employee needs must be very different if a leader wants any hope of seeing meaningful change. For the employee who means well but is absent-minded, it's important to acknowledge the why behind their actions in a positive way. Clearly, they're passionate about the brand, the customer experience, and their coworkers, so any conversation with them needs to start with assuming positive intent and meeting them where they are. Bob, I want you to know that I notice how much you care about your customers every single day, and I really appreciate it. If you have a minute, I'd love to give you more insight into how our roles fit together throughout the day so you can continue to progress within your role. The conversation is no longer about trying to fix an employee. Instead, it's about trying to help them get better because the doors it will open for them. For the structured employee who knows their schedule but just wants things to be their way, you might be thinking I'm going to say the approach needs to be different, but I'm not. Employee development in the context of leadership always needs to start with assuming positive intent. Because once you're unable to assume positive intent, it means you're no longer able to lead this person. And that means either it's time for them to leave the organization or it's time for you to leave the organization. It's easy to think this employee is stubborn, or that they just don't care about their coworkers. And that's the thought process of the leader who cares less about employee development and more about eliminating things that just make their own job harder. But if your motivation as a leader is truly about helping your employees become better people, assuming positive intent is a prerequisite. Jim, I can tell you excel at time management, and I really appreciate how you're never just standing around. If you have a minute, I'd love to give you some context as to why it might seem like I'm always so concerned with making sure people are where they're supposed to be. I think your skills in this area can help some of your coworkers who might need it. The conversation is now no longer about calling out an employee. Instead, it's about empowering that employee to use their skills in order to help their coworkers, while at the same time educating that employee on how their decisions impact everyone, something they may not even be aware of. When leaders shy away from addressing the little things, those little things almost always grow into bigger things that are much harder to address. As long as each battle you choose to fight is viewed as an opportunity to strengthen your relationship with one of your employees, your opponent in each of those battles will no longer be that employee. Instead, the 2 of you will be on the same side, fighting the same problem together. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on Monday.